and delivering aid to disaster-affected population. Please welcome Nishat, please.
Assalamu alaikum. All right. After this session, everybody's going to have the pleasure and opportunity for very in-depth learning sessions about some of the other functional areas. The HCT has been providing an opportunity here to briefly give an introduction to the HCT. So who's the HCT? Well, in this room, we're the ones who didn't manage to coordinate our wardrobes today. I apologize for that, and HCT, we need to hold ourselves to some of the high standards of these other groups. We welcome ideas. I want to acknowledge the great participation of the teams here. We spent the last 2 days having discussions on how to do this, and it's really impressive to see teams from across the region here to work together. I don't think that you can put a value on coming together and having this shared experience. So with that, I'll move on to the HCT. The HCT comes from the Interagency Standing Committee, which sets standards for humanitarian response across the globe. And these are some of the areas which they talk about with HCT. The goal, ensure that interagency humanitarian action relieves human suffering, protects lives and livelihoods, and the dignity of people in need. And the purpose is to provide that strategic direction and the coordination needed to make sure that that moves on. HCTs will also be present and have similar functions within your country. So I'll talk a little bit about the HCT in Pakistan. In line with the international norms and standards, it's to provide the strategic direction for collective interagency humanitarian response. And in a place like Pakistan, we can stay very busy. We have lots of partners working in different parts of the country, and it's really making sure that we have a coordinated approach and a response. Upholding the humanitarian principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence is the core and the standards which we hold ourselves to. And finally, we're guided by the international humanitarian and human rights laws and the principles of partnership. The primary purpose of the HCT is that in emergencies, the HCT supports and coordinates with national and subnational authorities, including crisis management agencies whenever possible and appropriate. The HCT and the agencies which are part of the HCT and the broader interagency humanitarian response is in support of local authorities and governments, providing the types of support which are needed to have a strong national response. Also, to note, government retains the primary role. We maintain close liaison communication, but we recognize the key decisions as far as how the response will be done, whether international assistance will be requested, falls with the government. So the composition of the HCT, which is an overarching body, and I just want to note that below the HCT there are a number of coordinating bodies which will have sector coordination, which might focus on thematic areas of information management, communication, and other elements. The HCT is the overarching structure. It's chaired by the humanitarian coordinator, who is joined us digitally today, and it's composed of agencies, organizations, which are undertaking humanitarian action in Pakistan. So UN agencies, national and international NGOs and civil society, as well as observer groups like the Red Cross and NSF. So within the terms of reference for HCT in Pakistan, I'll go through this briefly. There's 9 areas of accountability which we recognize. And so the HCT's role is critical in a humanitarian response, but maintaining preparedness, strong coordination, communication, making sure that capacities are available are also critical parts of HCT. So areas of accountability are participation in partnerships. It's a commitment to engage with those who are involved, to listen, to lead, and to make sure that the course where we go is understood and accepted by all those involved. Centrality of protection and humanitarian access. So this is really saying we need to make sure that those most vulnerable are getting the services, and that access is available, not just physical access, but the requisite authorities and permissions from government for NGOs and others to operate in these emergency areas. Accountability to affected populations, which means they have a voice, that we're listening, and that we're making sure our response is meeting their needs. We've talked about humanitarian response in emergencies. Another accountability is fit for purpose coordination. This means we do have to be flexible, we have to be adaptable, and we have to make sure that we're providing the best coordination to support and enhance the national response to emergencies. And importantly, emergency preparedness, response, and capacity building. Your preparedness and your ability to respond quickly and with the right interventions really depends on the investments which you've made up front and the capacities which you've developed. And I'll just note that this needs to be at all levels. There's been a lot of talk today about local response, quick response, and how important that is. So those capacities need to be at all levels of the country. Anticipatory action, which is related to preparedness, but it really is looking for those triggers so that we can establish ourselves and provide support, which actually reduces the impact of a disaster when it happens. Finally, resource mobilization, absolutely key. I think all of the partners of the HCT are very much dependent on strong leadership and engagement through the HCT and other ones with donors to make sure that the resources come in. And finally, it's the humanitarian development nexus. It's working with the development to ensure that we are focused on the vulnerabilities and reducing those vulnerabilities and risks, including those to climate change, including those to earthquakes, which might be related to construction standards, to make sure that the overall impact felt by the people of disasters is reduced. And finally, the HCT's role in this earthquake response exercise, we will be liaising very closely with government and other officials as we move towards developing the plans and the response, which will come through the humanitarian partners within Pakistan. We'll also develop information on requisite assessments, plans, and appeals, and we will be working on communication of the situation, of the needs, the response, and through the HCT and OCHA and others, that is shared broadly across our partners within the country, but also internationally. And I just would close with saying in this line of work and in Pakistan every night, when I go to bed, I'm thankful that there wasn't another disaster. At the same time, I know one day further from the last disaster is one day closer to the next. And that really shows, let's be grateful that we're here today and not responding to a disaster, but let's realize what we're doing here is very much preparing for what we know will come. We just don't know what, where, and how. So thank you, HCT. We look very forward to working with you all. Thank you.